Welcome to the July 2015 STAAR and TAKS training. This should be a brief training because all of you have already been a test administrator in Humble ISD for the spring of 2015. This is not going to go into great detail, so if you have questions, please be sure that you ask your campus testing coordinator this summer. Were you hired to be just a test administrator for this summer, meaning that you're not a summer school teacher? If you were only hired to be a test administrator, you must have a Chronos badge and you must use a paper timesheet. We use that as backup for the Chronos systems because sometimes we have issues with Chronos. The campus testing coordinator will have a paper timesheet for you to use on testing days. Please swipe in and out with your Chronos badge each day of testing. At the conclusion of the testing week, please turn the Chronos badge into the summer testing coordinator, and unless you use the Chronos badge for your campus position on a regular basis during the school year. Please sign and date the timesheet at the conclusion of the testing week. We'll compare that with Chronos to make sure that everything matches up so we don't have any corrections to do. So if you can't swipe in or out one day or you forget your ID, then we always have the backup paper system. You should have already completed the test security training and viewed the 3 TEA security modules. This was required of all Humble ISD teachers and staff earlier this spring. You should have also already read the test security supplement and the appropriate test administrator manual. These are the dates of the testing calendar for July. On Monday, July 6th is TAKS ELA as well as the STAAR English 1 EOC. On Tuesday, July 7th is TAKS Math, as well as some Biology, Algebra 1, and U.S. History tests. Wednesday, July 8th is the STAAR English 2 EOC and TAKS Science. And then on Thursday, July 9th is TAKS Social Studies, as well as STAAR Biology, Algebra 1, and U.S. History. As you are well aware, STAAR tests do have official time limits. English 1 and English 2 are 5-hour tests. Biology, Algebra 1, and U.S. History are 4-hour tests. Start and stop times must be recorded on the seating charts, and you are required to announce time left to test. You need to communicate orally or in writing the amount of time left to test in 1-hour intervals, and then more frequently during the last hour. Now, TAKS is different. TAKS is an untimed test, so students have until 2:45 to finish taking the TAKS test. If they are not finished at 2:45, they will submit what they have completed. If you have students who have testing accommodations, your campus testing coordinator will let you know in advance who those students are and what allowable testing materials, procedures, and accommodations that a student might have. That is only for STAAR testing. Students taking TAKS will not have any testing accommodations. You should already be aware of the responsibilities of testing personnel. You need to be sure that you're prepared for the administration. Please read through the test administrator manual in advance. You'll need to review and sign your security oath. Prepare the testing environment. Ensure proper testing procedures. You'll complete the administration process. You'll maintain test security and confidentiality at all times. You'll report any irregularities to your campus testing coordinator, and you'll need to use the seating charts provided. You'll also need to make sure that the classroom has been properly prepared for testing. You'll need to make sure that students are sufficiently separated. You'll need to be sure that you hang a testing do not disturb sign on the door. All bulletin boards and instructional displays that might be a source of direct answers should be covered. Clocks, either analog or digital, should be in the testing room. It's also allowable to display the time on a projector. All desks or computers used for testing must be cleared of books and other materials not required for testing. And you need to make every effort to prevent students from seeing another student's monitor. You will be given a bucket of testing material on the day of testing. You should only use the items for testing that are given to you by the campus testing coordinator. If it has not been given to you, then please confirm with the campus testing coordinator that it's something that can be used on the testing day. For your online administrations, you will receive a room accommodations roster for any students who have a testing accommodation. You'll receive a seating chart, a testing do not disturb sign, the cell phone policy, a student authorization form, pencils or pens, scratch paper. For students taking STAAR A or STAAR L, you'll have a pair of headphones for them. And then any additional TEA authorized materials needed for testing, such as a supplemental aid or allowable testing material, dictionaries, calculator, etc., all that will be provided to you by the campus testing coordinator. Dictionaries must be made available to all students taking the STAAR English 1 and English 2 EOC. They are able to use that dictionary throughout the English 1 and English 2 tests. For students taking the TAKS ELA test, they may only use the dictionary for the first sealed section of the test, which is the written composition. The dictionary must be collected from the student prior to the start of the second section of the test. The test administrator will receive a seal code which unlocks the second section of the online test for the student. For students taking the STAAR Algebra 1 EOC or the Math TAKS test, those students must have a graphing calculator. For students taking the Biology EOC or the Science TAKS test, those students must have access to a handheld 4-function scientific or graphing calculator, and there needs to be at least one of those for every 5 students. All memory must be cleared to factory default both before and after testing. If a student brings their own calculator, then we have to ensure that the memory is cleared. We generally do not allow students to bring their own calculator, but if they do, please talk with your campus testing coordinator on the day of testing so that we can be sure that the memory has been cleared and that the factory defaults have been restored. Students taking the English 1 EOC, English 2 EOC, or the TAKS ELA test will have a writing prompt or writing prompts. The test administrator may read aloud the writing prompt to any student who requests the assistance. Reading or discussing student compositions is not allowed. No assisting students before, during, or after the administration. The test administrator must not do the following: elaborate on the prompts, give students an opening or closing sentence, give students an outline for organizing their compositions, give students ideas about how to develop their compositions, nor translate the prompts into other languages. The directions for the STAAR EOCs can be found on the following pages. Please remember that directions must be read word for word. The say directions are all in bold. The words that are in italics are information meant for you and should not be read aloud to the students. For students taking a TAKS test, it is a separate test administrator manual, and the directions for each of the TAKS tests can be found on the following pages. All summer testing will be done online only, so that's all STAAR testing and all TAKS testing. If you've never given an online test, it's much easier than giving a paper test. When you get your bucket, you will receive a student authorization form for each student who's going to be testing in your room. This student authorization form is considered secure test material because it tells the student how to log on to the online assessment. When students arrive in your room, they will log onto the computer using his or her Humble ISD Novell login. If it is a student coming to us from out of district, or if it's a student who is no longer in school, then they will have to log in with a generic Novell login. The campus testing coordinator will provide this generic login to you as the test administrator. You are the only one who can type in that generic Novell login into the computer. Please do not share that generic login with the students. Once students are successfully logged into Novell, a test nav icon will appear on the desktop. Students need to double click on that test nav icon in order to launch the testing program. You will follow all of the instructions in the test administrator manual. Please be sure that you read every bolded word to the student as part of the directions. Once students double click on that test nav icon on the desktop, this is the screen that they will be brought to. You can see they'll be prompted to enter their username and their test code. As you read the test directions, students will be prompted to enter the username and test code, which is on the student authorization form. A couple of questions or topics that I want to go over with you about online testing. The first one is how many type characters are allowed for the written composition. The character count for written compositions is 1,750. So in a regular paper test, students have lines and they have to write all of their written responses on lines. On the online test, they're going to type it in. You'll notice on this screen that there's a character limit at the bottom, and it shows you that the student has already typed 713 of 1,750 characters. So if a student wants to know how much more space they have available, they can always look at the character count at the bottom of the screen. Some other things you need to know about online testing. If a student accidentally exits or closes the window of the test, the campus testing coordinator must restart the student's test. So on the day of testing, you're probably going to have your campus testing coordinator's cell phone number, or there's going to be a hall monitor nearby who can assist. So oftentimes, a student will get ahead of the test administrator as they read directions, and they'll log into the test, and they'll think, I'm not supposed to be logged in right now. So they close the window. What they don't realize is that they had already started their test. When they close it, they're not able to get back in until the campus testing coordinator restarts it. So it happens quite frequently, and it's very easy for the campus testing coordinator to get it restarted. So if a student says they can't log in, it probably is because they had already accidentally logged into it when they weren't supposed to that morning. So again, it's just an easy fix. Just let the campus testing coordinator know. When students are done testing, they're going to submit their answers for scoring. And when they tell you that they're done, I would have the students raise their hand. They'll see a screen that's a review screen, and it's going to tell them if there's any questions that haven't been answered yet. If there are questions that haven't been answered, they can simply click on those, and it's going to bring them right back to the question where they were. If they want to submit blank answers, then they certainly can do that. When they're ready to submit, you'll see them click submit, and the answers then are sent to Pearson for scoring. Before they leave, please be sure that you collect the student authorization form as well as any scratch paper that the students used. All of that needs to go back to the campus testing coordinator so that it can be shredded. As always during testing, if you have any questions, please ask your campus testing coordinator. Sometimes our neighbors know the answers, sometimes they don't. So if you have a question, I would rather you ask your campus testing coordinator before you ask somebody and you get an incorrect answer or you assume incorrectly. So no question is stupid on testing days. We want to make sure that every test is given according to the state's criteria. So on those testing days, stop, lock, and call. You've probably seen this slide before. The next set of slides are going to cover training for test administrators who may be giving an oral administration of a test. So if you are not giving an oral administration of a test or you're not giving STAAR A, then you're done with your training. If you are going to be a test administrator for a student who has an oral administration, or if they're taking STAAR A, then I need you to continue listening to the training. There's two different levels of an oral administration. The first one is reading parts of the test questions and answer choices. The other one is oral entirety, meaning that the student can have all eligible text read to him or her. The campus testing coordinator will let you know prior to testing if you have a student with an oral accommodation and what level of support they need for that test. Appendix B in the test administrator manual really goes over the do's and don'ts of giving an oral administration. For the English 1 and English 2 writing section, nothing can be read aloud other than the writing prompt. Required reference material may be read aloud, and this does include the dictionary. But for the writing section, it's only the prompt and then any reference materials. For the English 2 reading section, only test questions and answer choices and the required reference material can be read. But the reading selections may not be read aloud to the students. So please be sure that if you're giving this accommodation that you know what you can and cannot read from the English 1 and English 2 tests. So again, on the writing selection, it's only the writing prompt. On the reading selection, it's only the test questions and answer choices. Again, just to clarify on the English 1 and English 2 reading sections, again, Only the questions and answer choices may be read aloud. The student must read the selection first. When the student has finished reading the selection, the test administrator may read aloud each test question and then read the answer choices. The test questions and answer choices must be read aloud in the order that they are presented on the test. The reading selections may never be read aloud to a student. Again, just to clarify for the writing test, an oral administration is never allowed for any part of the revising and editing passages, questions, nor answer choices. Reading aloud the writing prompt is an allowable procedure for any student who needs this assistance. Required reference material and allowable accommodations may be read aloud to an eligible student. This includes the dictionary and any supplemental aids. On the English 1 or English 2 test, if a test question contains a text box, you may read aloud the text. You cannot interpret or analyze any of the information. Here's an example from an English 1 test where there is a box around that text. You may read aloud that box in its entirety. For the STAAR Algebra 1 Biology and U.S. History test, any part of the test may be read aloud to an eligible student. This applies to words in the questions and answer choices, including the words and graphics. The test administrator must read aloud the test questions and answer choices in the order they are presented. The test question must be read aloud prior to reading the answer choices. This slide demonstrates graphics for a question. When a test question contains a graphic, such as a table, a graph, a grid, diagram, map, photograph, cartoon, or picture, say to the student, look at the answer choices and mark your answer. If necessary, say, tell me whether you would like anything read aloud. This is another example of a graphic. You can say to the student, take a few moments to look at the graphic and tell me whether you would like me to read anything aloud. Then let me know when you're ready to go on. When reading aloud words, numbers, or symbols, be careful not to aid the student in interpreting or analyzing the information, since the ability to interpret and analyze is part of what is being tested. This is an example of a U.S. history question. Again, they can look at the graphic and you can say to the student, take a few moments, look at the graphic, and tell me if you would like anything read aloud. Let me know when you're ready to go on. For this example, if this is read aloud, do not define any terms. You may only read aloud the words that are shown. This is another example of a U.S. history test question. You may read aloud the box in its entirety. So just like you would see on an English test, if you see a box, then you can read all of the text contained within that box. Just be careful that you do not interpret or analyze any of the information. When content-specific terms and symbols appear in a test question or answer choice, read them in the same way the student hears them in daily instruction. This will ensure the test is administered accurately. The examples shown here are only samples. There are many other content-specific terms and symbols which exist. For this example, for Algebra 1, on answer choice B, that would be read aloud as y is equal to 2 to the x power. For answer choice D, that would be read aloud as y is equal to the square root of x. For the biology sample below, they use a combination of capital B's and lowercase b's. The capital B should be read aloud as capital B, uppercase B, or big B. Looking at answer choice D, that would be read aloud as 2 capital B, 1 capital B, lowercase b, 0, lowercase b, lowercase b. If you are giving an oral administration, it's important that you remember these following things. Test administrators must not rephrase, clarify, or interpret any test content. Test administrators must keep their voice inflection neutral. However, words that are bold-faced, italicized, or printed entirely in capital letters must be emphasized. Unauthorized verbal and nonverbal assistance may not be provided to students. And test administrators must be made aware of the different levels of reading support that can be provided during an oral administration. For each student receiving an oral admin, the TA must know which level of reading support the student is to receive and whether the student can change a level of reading support during testing. The next several slides will cover the specifics of giving a STAAR A test. All students who are taking a STAAR A test should have gone through an online tutorial already, but on the day of testing, if they get stuck, can the test administrator help them? So the answer to that question is, at any point during the test session, the test administrator may use the say directions or paraphrase directions from the test administrator manual to assist students if they have trouble navigating through the assessment or need reminders of how to turn the tools and accessibility features on and off. In addition, the test administrator may read aloud the information presented to the student in the help tool. So again, you can help with directions about how to use the tools and the accessibility features, but of course we can't help them with any test questions. If you're not familiar with a STAAR A assessment, it's a regular STAAR test, but it's given online, and there are built-in features that can help the student access the test. So some of the online tools that are built in are answer eliminators, highlighters, eraser, a pencil, a notepad, a dot tool, a line tool, a ruler, a calculator, and reference materials. So those are built in to the test. Not all of those are built into every test because some of those are specific to the subject area. For accessibility features, they have text to speech, where the written word can be translated over into speech. There's a zoom feature so that students can make the font appear larger or smaller. There's a color and contrast feature so students can actually change the color of the screen and or the color of the text that they're reading. There's also a place marker that students can use. The directions that you will read to them on the day of testing go over the use of accessibility features and embedded accommodations, but if students have already gone through the tutorial prior to testing, then it makes it pretty easy on that testing day to go through it. But again, you're going to read through those directions with them on that testing day. Some of the embedded accommodations are pop-ups, rollovers, blank graphic organizers, and writing checklists. And I'm going to go over those in the next couple of slides. Okay, a pop-up is one of the embedded features of the test. You'll see for this example, it says, what is the density of the mineral sample? The word density is underlined in blue. If the word is underlined like that, the student can click on that word. When they click on it, then a pop-up box will appear, and it provides a definition, a synonym, a picture, graphic organizer, formula, or even an animation. So here's an example of this question. When a student clicks on the word density, then the pop-up appears, which is the formula. When a student doesn't want to see that pop-up anymore, they simply click on the red X and it goes away. A rollover is another embedded accommodation for the STAAR A test. A rollover rewords or clarifies larger portions of text, or it provides bulleted steps in a process. So here's an example. When a student sees a small blue box near words or phrases, when they click on that box, then a rollover appears. The rollover appears over the original text when it opens, and if a student no longer wants to see that rollover, then they click on the blue X, and again it disappears. If they want to see the rollover again, they would simply click on that blue box again, and the rollover is going to once again appear. What's exactly the purpose of a pop-up, a rollover, and exhibit windows? Well, they really help make the test more accessible for students with disabilities. So pop-ups do any of those following bulleted items that are listed. They basically help to define or clarify phrases using plain language, synonyms, definitions. Could be a visual representation by adding a graphic or a photograph or an animation. It may isolate specific information in a test question that corresponds to the answer choices. Anyway, it does all of these things. A rollover, when a rollover appears, it usually rewords complex questions or answer choices to condense the text. It may bullet or separate steps in a process. On a history test, it could paraphrase historical excerpts. An exhibit window, when it appears, it's usually going to be a commonly used blank graphic organizer or a T-chart or something like that that a student could use on the test. Pop-ups and rollovers are great, but right now for the STAAR A assessment, the text-to-speech feature does not work on any pop-ups or rollovers or exhibit windows. So if a student needs to have that read to them, then the test administrator actually has to help assist with it. So the text-to-speech does not read aloud pop-ups and rollovers. Again, the test administrator may read aloud these embedded accommodations at the student's request. The student does not have to have an oral administration in order to qualify for this. Any student who's taking the STAAR A assessment can have the pop-ups and rollovers read to him or her. The test administrator may not read aloud any text and reading selections. There's going to be a do not read icon on the screen. So when you see that, then nothing from those pop-ups and rollovers can be read aloud. This is the accessibility panel for the text-to-speech function in STAAR A. So if a student clicks the play button, the questions and answer choices are read aloud. The audio plays continuously to the end or until the student stops the playback. When the play button is activated, it becomes a pause button with which the student can interrupt the playback. When the continuous read mode is in use or has been paused, the rewind button can be used to reset the audio back to the beginning of the question. The student can click to change the level of the volume. They can increase it or they can decrease it. They can change the playback rate of the text, so they can make the text really slow or they can make it really fast. They can change it so that if they click words only, then they're going to hear just one word at a time. So if they only wanted to hear the word, say, president instead of President Lincoln, then they could click on just words, and if they clicked on the word president, they're only going to hear the word president. One of the neat things about the text-to-speech feature for STAAR A is that there actually are some things that are read to students that would not normally be read to students on a STAAR test. So for STAAR A, pre-reading text, revising selections, and reading and revising test questions and answer choices are actually read to them through the STAAR A interface. It's done via the text-to-speech mode. This is not something that a test administrator can read aloud to a student. It's only activated in the text-to-speech function. The next two slides go over what is read and what is not read to a student as part of the STAAR A test. So for the English 1 and English 2 test, what is read by the computer? It's all pre-reading text, some selections such as the revising, and some test questions such as revising are read to the student via the computer. These are not things that a test administrator can read to a student. Only the computer can read it to a student. What can be read on the English 1 and English 2 test at the student request? That is a pop-up in the revising question and selections. The writing prompt can be read aloud to a student. The exhibit window, which are writing checklists, and rollovers in the revising and revising questions and selections. So again, it's pretty much just the pop-ups, the writing prompt, and the exhibit window. What can never be read? Editing selections and questions, they'll all have a do not read icon, and anything that is read by the computer. So if it's something that's already been read by the computer, test administrator cannot read it. So again, the only things that you're going to be able to read for the English 1 and English 2 test to a STAAR A kiddo are going to be the pop-ups, the exhibit window, and the writing prompt. For the Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History STAAR A test, what is read by the computer? It's all test questions and answer choices. So anything that is a test question or answer choice for a STAAR test, it's going to be read aloud to a STAAR A kiddo via the text-to-speech accommodation. What can be read by the test administrator at the student request? That's going to be the pop-ups, the rollovers, any exhibit windows, and the reference material. And then what can never be read aloud to a student by the test administrator? And that's anything that's already been read to the student on the computer. So again, for the Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History test, the only thing that you can actually read to a student are going to be the pop-ups, rollovers, exhibit windows, and the reference material. Everything else is already being read to them via the text-to-speech accommodation. If you have specific questions about how to give an oral administration or how to give a STAAR A assessment, please be sure that you ask your campus testing coordinator for clarification. Again, if you have further questions that haven't been covered in this training, please be sure that you ask your summer testing coordinator any questions that you might have. This is the end of the training for the July 2015 STAAR and TAKS training.